My son's wedding was only for special people. I gave my life to him, yet I wasn't special enough. That betrayal is a pain I will never forget. I was sitting in my living room, the phone heavy in my hand, when my daughter-in-law's voice cut through the air. "We got married yesterday, Helen. It was only for special people." The words weren't a shock so much as a final, agonizing confirmation. They landed like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Special people. The phrase echoed in the hollow space where my heart had once been. For 3 years, I had poured my life and my savings into my son Michael and his girlfriend Samantha. I had been their rock, their provider, their lifeline. I had paid their $500 monthly rent, filled their refrigerator when they were broke, and furnished their home from top to bottom. But I wasn't special enough to be at my only son's wedding. I stood there, the weight of 1,000 disappointments pressing down on me, watching Michael avoid my gaze while Samantha made herself comfortable on the very sofa I had bought them. A pale pink silk dress I had picked out for her hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the shattered illusion of being a part of the most important day of my son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, dreaming of how I would look in their wedding photos I would never appear in. For weeks, I had meticulously planned every detail, saved up $1,000 as a gift, and even cleaned my house from top to bottom, hoping they'd come celebrate with me. All of that collapsed in an instant with those venomous words. Michael finally lifted his gaze, his voice sounding rehearsed. "Mom, it was an intimate thing, just the two of us and the witnesses, but I knew it was a lie." I had seen the photos on social media. Samantha's parents proudly posing with the newlyweds, her siblings raising champagne glasses in a toast, the white dress I had helped finance with the $800 I had given her for personal expenses just last month. I saw everything I wasn't meant to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after the humiliation, my phone rang. It was Samantha. Her voice was completely different now, no longer the confident, smug one that had excluded me. It was desperate, pleading. "Helen, the rent is overdue. The landlord says he'll kick us out if we don't pay this week. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled slightly, as if the world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, a film of my own foolishness playing in my mind. I remembered all the times I had rushed to the bank, all the plans I had canceled, all the meals of beans and rice I had eaten to ensure they had everything they desired. And now, after they had so cruelly cast me aside, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Samantha," I said, my voice shockingly calm. "Didn't I tell you I only help special people?" The silence on the other end was so profound I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trembling. It was her. "Helen, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies wrapped in that saccharine voice she only used when she wanted something. The same voice she had used to ask for money for the wedding dress, the rings, and the honeymoon, all of which I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony. For so long, I had walked on eggshells weighing every word, every gift, every gesture, just to get a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent benefactor who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," had awakened something inside me that had been dormant for far too long. I had done the math in my head. Over $20,000 I had spent on them in 3 years. Money taken from my retirement, my savings, the peace my late husband had left me. All for what? To be a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night, after I hung up, I sat on my bed and wept. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure fury, of years of humiliation finally spilling over. I cried for the foolish woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to people who considered her dispensable. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me had fundamentally shifted. I looked in the bathroom mirror, at my tired eyes and the wrinkles that told stories of giving love without getting it back. But today there was a new hardness in my gaze, a steely determination I didn't recognize. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, and for the first time I didn't check my phone for a message from Michael. I was my own first concern of the day. I took out my checkbook and bank statements. The truth stared back at me in cold, hard numbers. Monthly rent, $500 x 36 months at sea, $18,000 food, and supplies, $200 x 36 months. $7,200 gifts, and emergencies, at least $3,000. The car loan I never got back, $2,500. The living room furniture, $1,200. The total, a staggering $3,400. That was the price of my generosity. The exact sum of my foolishness. The phone rang. It was Michael. I let it ring. Then Samantha. I ignored her too. A text came from Michael. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted it without a reply. Later that afternoon, I went for a walk. Not for an errand, but just for myself. I passed the bank where I had so often made their transfers. The branch manager, Mr. Klein, waved. I walked directly into his office. Mr. Klein, I said, I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have programmed. He was surprised, but his concern was genuine. Mrs. Miller, are you sure? My last name wasn't Richter, it was Miller. I hadn't even noticed the change in the original story. The memories were a jumble, but the core was there. I'd stick with Miller. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein, I said, a new lightness in my voice. On the contrary, I have finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, my phone was ringing off the hook. I turned it off. I felt a strange sense of liberation, as if I had shed an enormous burden. For the first time in years, my money was entirely my own. As I pulled into my driveway, 3 cars were parked in front of my house. Michael's, Samantha's, and one I didn't recognize. My heart hammered in my chest, but this time it was a drum of anticipation, not fear. Through the windows, I could see movement inside my own house. They had keys. I had trusted them with keys, believing they would one day take care of me. I took a deep breath, clutching my own keys in my hand. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the front door to a scene that felt like a nightmare in broad daylight. Michael was sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands. Samantha paced back and forth like a trapped animal. And a third person, an older man I didn't recognize, was going through papers on my dining table, my private documents. What in the world is going on here? I asked, my voice much steadier than I expected. All 3 of them looked up as if I were the intruder. Samantha was the first to speak, her voice now filled with a desperate urgency. Helen, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher. He's from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The words came out with a chilling calm. What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine. Michael finally lifted his head. His eyes, once belonging to an innocent child, now reflected nothing but financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled all the transfers and blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Fisher, a man in his 50s in a gray suit with a smile that inspired no confidence, stepped forward. Mrs. Miller, I'm Mr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went straight to my dining table and collected my documents. These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Michael interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. We're just worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you cut us off financially without an explanation. Then you stopped answering our calls. We think you might need professional help. Samantha approached me, trying to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. Helen, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. It was also clear now. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent and seizing control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old lady. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. I am clearer than I have been in years, and all three of you are going to leave my house right now. Mr. Fisher cleared his throat, trying to sound reasonable. Mrs. Miller, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that escaped my throat was hoarse, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding to no longer finance the lives of two adults who treat me like trash? Samantha jumped up as if I had slapped her. We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was. The naked, unvarnished truth. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were just trying to collect their inheritance in advance. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left. To them, I was just a walking, talking ATM that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you get out of my house. Michael stood up, his face contorted in the angry, childlike scowl he used when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off like this. Oh, I can't. My voice rose for the first time. Who says I can't? For years, I paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I was not welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Fisher took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. Mrs. Miller, we've prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Michael and Samantha to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you feel better. I picked up the folder and, without even looking at it, threw it directly into the trash can. The only transition that's going to happen here is yours, to the front door. Samantha began to cry, but they were tears of pure frustration, of contained rage. You can't do this to us, Helen. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things, took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you. Obligations based on my money, I shot back. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I've decided my money is better used for my own life, I'm suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Michael tried to approach me, but I took a step back. He was no longer the little boy who ran into my arms when he had nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between himself and a comfortable life financed by others. Mom, we made mistakes, he said, trying to sound remorseful. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Samantha was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just become reasonable again. Reasonable? The word tasted like ash. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Fisher, packing his papers with the efficiency of someone used to a failed pitch, gave me a final warning. Mrs. Miller, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you're truly making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine you need a guardian. His words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. They wanted to have me declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. Mr. Fisher, I said, looking him directly in the eyes, I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after her husband's death, who worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially supported two completely capable adults. Samantha stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally showed her true face. This won't stay like this, Helen. We have rights, and we have lawyers too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. All three of them walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people who aren't used to being told no. Before he went out, Michael turned to me one last time. Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Michael, I said, with a deep sadness but also with crystalline clarity. I'm already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, but not out of sadness or regret. It was pure adrenaline, the rush of a woman who had finally reclaimed her own life. I lay awake, planning my next steps like a general preparing for a battle. If Michael and Samantha wanted a war, I would give them one. But it would be a war fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 in the morning, I was already dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of Mr. Weber, an attorney I had met years ago while handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Fisher, whom Michael and Samantha had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. Mrs. Miller, he said as I explained the situation, what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words both calmed and worried me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy. What had happened was truly abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was far more serious than I had thought. We have to document everything, Mr. Weber continued. Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total sum. $3,400 in 3 years. Mrs. Miller, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. When I left his office, I had a complete battle plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visits. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank. And fourth, I would start living the life I had postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, had known me for years because I was always buying things to fix Michael and Samantha's apartment. This time it was different. Mrs. Miller, what brings you here today? He asked with the familiarity of a person who had silently witnessed my wasted generosity. Another emergency with your son? No, Mr. Summer. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want them to be of the best quality. He looked at me with a surprised but unspoken understanding. While I was choosing the locks, his son, Ethan, who installed security systems, came by. It felt like Providence in action. Ethan, I told him, I also need to install surveillance cameras, the complete system. The price is not an issue. While they were preparing everything for the installation the next day, I received a call from an unknown number. I knew it had to be Samantha calling from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number. Helen, it's Samantha. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Speak, I said, my voice dry. Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Michael and I have talked about it, and we want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We can do it at your house, cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her words was so obvious that I almost had to laugh. Samantha, how much rent do you owe exactly? The silence on the other end confirmed that I had hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Helen. We really miss you in our lives. Do you miss me or my money? I asked directly. Both, she replied with a surprising lack of shame. Helen, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing? Another silence. We both knew the answer. Samantha, I'm only going to explain this to you once. For 3 years, you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me? Helen, please, I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned the phone off completely. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon. I hadn't been there in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Michael or Samantha needed something urgent, or because the money I had set aside for myself became an emergency for them. Mrs. Miller, my favorite hairstylist Cynthia, called out. What a surprise! I thought you had forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I also deserved to be pampered. I treated myself to the full treatment: cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling a shred of guilt. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Michael and Samantha's needs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Miller, she said when she was done. But more than that, you look free? Did something good happen? Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no. When I got home that afternoon, there was a car in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart raced, but as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on the steps of my porch. Mrs. Miller? She asked as I got out of my car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never really had a chance to talk. Yesterday, I heard some very loud voices and I got worried. Is everything okay? Her sincere concern touched me deeply. Here was a stranger who showed more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks, I said. I'll make you a coffee and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. While I made coffee, I told Eleanor the whole story. I started from the beginning, the secret wedding, the chilling words, the humiliation of realizing I was just a walking wallet. I described the legal threats, the lawyer they brought to my house, and the way they tried to twist my newfound independence into a sign of mental decline. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her eyes filled with a deep understanding that made me feel seen for the first time in a very long time. When I finished, her eyes were filled with tears. Helen, she said, her voice soft but firm, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money. What happened? I asked, hanging on her every word. I cut off the money when I realized they only called me when they needed something. At first, it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, and tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to genuinely apologize. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not on money. Her words gave me a glimmer of hope and confirmed that I had made the right decision. Do you think Michael and Samantha will understand one day? Maybe yes, maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility. Helen, your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Michael and Samantha had money for rent, for food, for their whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, Ethan and Mr. Summer came at 8 in the morning to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone didn't stop ringing from unknown numbers. Samantha was still trying to contact me from different phones, but I had developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't suit me. Mrs. Miller, Ethan said as he installed the cameras, this system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see from your phone who is coming to your house even when you're not here. And if someone breaks in without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police. The irony was not lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't hurt as much as it used to. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they were working, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: call my sister Margaret in Chicago. We had lost touch because every time we talked, I would tell her about Michael and Samantha's successes, about how much money I had spent on them, about how proud I was to be able to help them. I now realized that our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. "Helen?" Margaret answered, surprised. "Sister, how are you?" "We haven't spoken in months." "I'm good, Margaret." "Better than good. I'm calling you to tell you that I've finally come to my senses." I told her the whole story from the beginning: the secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, and my decision to cut off the funding. Margaret listened in silence, and when I was done, her answer surprised me. "Helen, sister, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how." "What did you want to tell me?" "That Michael never spoke lovingly about you when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always, 'My mom helped me with this,' or 'My mom bought me that.' But never, 'I miss my mom,' or 'I love my mom.' It was as if you were a service provider, not a person." Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain. Like when a doctor cleans an infected wound. It hurts, but it's part of the healing. "You know what else I noticed?" Margaret continued. "Samantha always spoke about you in the future tense. When Helen is no longer here, we can remodel her house. Or, when we inherit, we will invest in the business." As if they were waiting for you to die to really live? This revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM, they saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. While I was trying to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. After talking with Margaret, I sat in my kitchen, processing all this information. Years of marriage to a man who truly loved me, 35 years of raising my son alone after my husband's death, and 3 years of financing 2 adults who saw me as a $100,000 obstacle. The irony was devastating. The doorbell rang. On the new cameras, I saw it was Eleanor with a mug in her hands. I opened the door and she handed me a freshly brewed coffee. "I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday," she said, with that sincere smile I had already come to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and Eleanor told me more details from her own experience. "My daughter said the exact same thing to me that Samantha says to you. You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway." Those are rehearsed phrases. Helen. They learn them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. "Do you think such a handbook exists?" I asked half-jokingly. "Not officially, but it seems everyone reads from the same book." Chapter 1 is Make Her Feel Indispensable. Chapter 2 is Create Constant Financial Emergencies. Chapter 3 is When She Resists, Question Her Mental Health. We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It was both funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. "Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money?" I asked Eleanor. "Every single day for the first 3 months," she answered honestly. But then I started to see the results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years: visit my husband's grave. I always made excuses not to go because Michael or Samantha needed something urgent, or because the taxi fare was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Robert's grave looked a bit neglected because I hadn't been there to clean it in months. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Michael. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, but I think in the process, I forgot to be myself." The wind blew gently, and for a moment, I felt like he was listening to me. "Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this and I didn't want to see it. His wife. Well, you know how she is. The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. Not anymore. I cleaned my husband's grave, replaced the withered flowers with fresh ones, and stayed there for another hour, just enjoying the silence. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing home to solve a crisis for Michael and Samantha. When I finally got back, my heart raced as I saw 3 cars parked in front of my house again. But this time, I was prepared. The security cameras showed me it was Michael, Samantha, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed agitated, talking to each other and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Mr. Weber, my lawyer. "Mr. Weber," I said, my voice calm despite the pounding in my chest. "They're at my house again. This time, they've brought more people." "Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Miller. I'll be there right away and I'll call the police." After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. "They are not allowed on your property." Minutes later, Mr. Weber and 2 police patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers talk to Michael and Samantha. I saw my son gesticulate angrily, his face contorted in a mask of rage. I saw Samantha crying again, but this time her tears did not move me. They were as transparent as the lies she so easily told. One of the officers approached my car. "Ma'am, you can get out safely. Your visitors are going to leave immediately." As I stepped out of the car, Michael shouted at me from the street. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." "Michael," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. And family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs," Samantha screamed from across the street. "You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this." Mr. Weber stepped forward, his voice a shield of steel. "Mrs. Brooks, any future communication must be through my office, and I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 3 years. It's not a legal debt. It's a gift." I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this whole situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Eleanor. And more importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. That night, Eleanor invited me to her house for dinner. I met her daughter, Julia, who was visiting, and I was able to see with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincerely about each other's lives, and laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money once the entire evening. "I wanted that with Michael, too," I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter had left. "And maybe you'll get it one day," she replied. "But first, he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income." For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed me that Michael and Samantha were driving past my house several times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes they parked for a few minutes, but without getting out. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for their next move. Mr. Weber had advised me to document every one of these visits, so I kept a detailed log with the date and time. "Their persistence will work in our favor," he had said. "Every time they show up after we've told them not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order." On Friday morning, I was calmly having breakfast when the doorbell rang. The cameras showed me a very well-dressed young woman with a folder in her hands and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture told me it was not a social visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," she said as I opened the door. "I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. Michael and Samantha had escalated the situation. It was no longer just threats from private lawyers. Now they had involved the government. "Can I see your ID?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She showed me an official ID that looked genuine. "I am social worker Ms. Schmidt. Can I come in and talk to you?" I let her in, knowing that a refusal would have been worse for my case. Ms. Schmidt sat down in my living room and took a form out of her folder. "Mrs. Miller, We have received reports that you have shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you have cut off communication with your family, and that you have shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you have refused medical and legal help from your loved ones. Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed old woman. I recognized Samantha's handwriting in the wording. She had always been skilled at manipulating words to get what she wanted. "Ms. Schmidt," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this is not a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it should not be a problem to speak with me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers use to justify their invasions. If you're innocent, you shouldn't complain about your privacy being violated. "Miss, I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or come back another day, but I will not answer any questions without legal representation present." I called Mr. Weber, and he was there within 20 minutes. When he came in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Ms. Schmidt," Mr. Weber said after checking her ID, his voice a low growl, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." Ms. Schmidt's confident smile faltered. "Sir, we have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber asked dryly. "The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that broke into her house without permission and checked her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money?" He took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Here, I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. Over $3,400 that were withdrawn from her accounts in 3 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If someone needs to be investigated here, it is not my client." Ms. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious that the information she had been given did not match the reality in front of her. "Mrs. Miller," she said finally, turning to me, "can you explain to me why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son?" "Because I finally discovered they were using me," I replied, my voice steady. "Because I realized that to them I wasn't a mother, but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle. But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question outraged me. "Ms. Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore," Mr. Weber interjected. "Ms. Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without the help of his 71-year-old mother?" Ms. Schmidt did not answer right away. I could see she was reevaluating the entire situation. "Mrs. Miller," she asked after a moment, "do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medication? Just vitamins and occasionally aspirin. I don't have any medical conditions that require medication," Mr. Weber added. "My client has just undergone extensive medical exams as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical condition." Ms. Schmidt closed her folder. "Mrs. Miller, based on this conversation and the documentation I have reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case." After she left, Mr. Weber and I remained silent for a few minutes. "Helen," he said finally, "this is going to continue to escalate. Michael and Samantha are spending money they don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they are desperate?" "It means that exactly. What else can they do? They can file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and hard to win. But if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian assigned. The thought terrified me. They could take control of my money. They could try, Mr. Weber said. But we have solid evidence that you are completely competent and that they are motivated by greed and not by genuine concern. That afternoon, I called my sister Margaret to vent. "Sister," she said after hearing my story, "do you notice how far they are willing to go for money? They are risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, destroying their own reputation, all to get access to your bank account again." Her words made me think. Michael and Samantha had completely revealed their true nature. There was no going back. There was no possibility of a genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law. I had always just been money on legs. This revelation, although painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They had proven for themselves that my emotional and physical well-being was less important to them than my money. That evening, Eleanor came to visit with a surprise. She had invited her friends from the garden club to meet me. "Helen," she introduced me. "These are my friends Cynthia, who you already know from the salon, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. We have all been through similar situations with abusive family members. We spent the evening sharing stories. Maria had had to set boundaries with a brother who constantly asked her for money. Carmen had cut off her relationship with a daughter who only visited when she needed money. Alfreda had had to change her will after she found out her grandchildren considered her their retirement plan. What hurts me the most, I confessed, is not losing the money I gave them, but realizing that I never had the love I thought I had. "Helen, my dear," Alfreda said with the wisdom of her 80 years, "true love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real." Alfreda's words were a balm for my wounded soul. She was right. I had bought attention, not love. I had financed an illusion. "You know what I've discovered," I said to my new friends. "That loneliness surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than being lonely on your own. At least now when I am alone, I am in good company." Everyone laughed, and we toasted to our newfound wisdom. That night, after my new friends had left, I sat in my garden thinking. The stars shone brighter than ever, or perhaps I was seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone financially. I had no dependents, no financial obligations to anyone but myself. And instead of scaring me, this reality excited me. I could travel when I wanted. I could remodel my house. I could buy myself nice clothes. I could donate to charities that were important to me. I could invest in my own future instead of financing the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope, and for the first time in years, I wanted to plan my future. A month after the social worker's visit, I thought I had finally won the war. I had settled into a beautiful routine. I calmly had breakfast and read the newspaper. I tended to my garden, had lunch with Eleanor or one of my new friends, and in the afternoons, I devoted myself to activities I had given up for years. I had started painting again, something I was passionate about before I became Michael and Samantha's personal financier. But on a Thursday morning, while I was painting flowers on my new easel, Mr. Weber came to my house with a grim expression that made my blood run cold. "Helen, we need to talk. Michael and Samantha have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence in family court. They are requesting to have a legal guardian assigned to you." The words fell on me like stones. I knew it was a possibility, but hearing it out loud made it terrifyingly real. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge determines that you are unable to manage your affairs, yes. He could place Michael as your legal guardian, which would give him full control over your finances. I sat down heavily on my sofa, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had experienced in my life. My own son was trying to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. Mr. Weber, what evidence could they have? You yourself have seen that I am completely competent. They have statements from 3 witnesses who claim you have behaved erratically. They also submitted unpaid doctor's bills that you supposedly didn't pay, and medications that you supposedly hoarded without taking them. They also have the statement from Dr. Lehman, a psychiatrist, who states that you refused to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They had turned my refusal to undergo an unnecessary exam into proof of a mental illness. They had used my instinct to protect myself from them as proof that I needed protection. Who are the three witnesses? Mr. Weber looked through his documents. Samantha, of course, a neighbor named Mr. Davis, and someone who claims to be your pharmacist. Mr. Green. Mr. Davis was the neighbor across the street. An unpleasant man who had always had problems with me, because my friends sometimes parked in front of his house. Mr. Green was indeed my pharmacist, but I didn't understand what he could have against me. I need to talk to Mr. Green, I told Mr. Weber. Something's not right. We went to the pharmacy together that afternoon. Mr. Green received me surprised and nervous. Mrs. Miller, it's good to see you. How are you, Mr. Green? I was told you signed a statement saying I show erratic behavior with my medications. His face turned red as a tomato. Mrs. Miller, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago and asked about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. And what did you tell her? I explained to her that you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have any regular medical prescriptions. But she insisted that this was proof that you weren't taking adequate care of your health. Mr. Weber interjected. Mr. Green, did you sign a paper? She brought a document that said I was confirming that Mrs. Miller had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been tricked into signing something he didn't fully understand. Samantha's manipulation knew no bounds. Mr. Green, I said, I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no problems with medications. Of course, Mrs. Miller, I am terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. After the pharmacy, we went to confront Mr. Davis. When we knocked on his door, he received us with obvious hostility. What do you want, Mrs. Miller? He said gruffly. I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior, Mr. Weber said. And you're right, I did. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. Can you be more specific about the behaviors you observed? Installing cameras as if she lived in a war zone, having strangers visit all the time, yelling at her family in the street. I realized Mr. Davis had taken everything out of context. The cameras had been installed for protection. The strangers were my new friends. The yelling was me defending my house from Michael and Samantha's invasions. Mr. Davis, I said, do you know why I installed the cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. That's what a crazy person would say, he replied, cruelly. There was no way to reason with him. His statement was based on superficial observations maliciously interpreted. That evening, Mr. Weber and I sat down to plan our defense. Helen, he said, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Moore, who is an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm that you are completely competent. What if Michael and Samantha have bribed the judge? I asked, a wave of fear washing over me. What if none of this matters because they have already decided to declare me incompetent? Helen, the legal system is not perfect, but it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motivations. We are going to fight this. The next day, I went to my appointment with Dr. Moore. She was a woman in her 50s with kind but astute eyes. Mrs. Miller, she said, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and tests to assess your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly. For 2 hours, she asked me questions about my memory, my reasoning ability, my financial understanding, and my emotional health. She also gave me cognitive tests and asked me to solve mathematical and logical problems. Mrs. Miller, she said at the end, your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this? I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. Based on what you've told me in the documents I've reviewed, this seems to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's more common than people think. I left the consultation feeling validated but also sad. The professional confirmation of my mental health was a relief, but it also confirmed that the lawsuit was real and necessary. That afternoon, Eleanor organized an emergency meeting with all our friends from the garden club. When I told them about the incompetence lawsuit, everyone was outraged. "Helen," Maria said, "we will testify in your favor. We have been with you for weeks, and anyone can see that you are doing great. Better than great," Cynthia added. "You are clearer and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know." Alfreda, with her 80-year-old wisdom, took my hands. "Helen, my dear, what your children are doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents insane to get their money. But you have something many of these victims didn't have: documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you." Her words gave me hope. I was not alone in this fight. I had an army of strong women who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. "You know what the saddest thing about all this is?" I said. "That Michael and Samantha are willing to destroy any future possibility of reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything so far, there's no going back from this." "And maybe that's for the best," Cynthia replied. "At least now you know exactly who they are, and you can act accordingly." That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I really cried. Not out of sadness, but out of grief. I said my final goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love was reciprocated. But something new also emerged within me, an iron determination not to let myself be stripped not only of my money, but also of my dignity and my freedom. The war had officially begun, but I was ready to fight. The day of the court hearing was a cold, rainy day, as if the weather itself was a reflection of the atmosphere. I sat in the courtroom with Mr. Weber, feeling a mix of anxiety and cold resolve. Across the room, Michael and Samantha sat with their lawyer. Mr. Fisher, a man with a cold, professional demeanor, whom I recognized as Dr. Lehman, sat with them. The hearing began, and Mr. Fisher presented his case. He painted a picture of a woman who was once a loving, generous mother, but who had suddenly become paranoid and unstable. Mrs. Miller's abrupt decision to cut off all communication and financial support for her family is a clear sign of erratic and irrational behavior, he argued. He then called Dr. Lehman to the stand. The psychiatrist testified that Helen's refusal to be evaluated by him, a specialist in mental health, was a red flag. Her unwillingness to cooperate with a professional evaluation indicates a clear lack of insight into her own mental state, he said with an air of absolute certainty. He also presented the fabricated unpaid doctor's bills, claiming they were proof of my neglect of my own health. Mr. Fisher then called Mr. Davis to the stand. My neighbor, with his usual unpleasant scowl, recounted how I had installed cameras on my house, how I had yelled at my family on the street, and how I had strange people visiting me all the time. His testimony, full of malicious interpretations and lack of context, was designed to make me seem like a deranged old woman. When Mr. Fisher finished his presentation, Mr. Weber stood up with a calm that contrasted sharply with the other lawyer's aggressive tone. "Your Honor," he said, "the plaintiff has painted a picture of a woman in crisis. We, on the other hand, will show that this is a woman who has finally chosen to live for herself after years of selfless sacrifice." Mr. Weber's first witness was my pharmacist. "Mr. Green," he testified nervously, but his words were a bombshell. "I was manipulated by the defendant, Mrs. Brooks," he said, looking at Samantha. "She told me she needed me to sign a paper for her insurance, and I did so without reading the fine print. I hereby retract my statement and confirm that Mrs. Miller is a completely healthy individual who only buys occasional vitamins and painkillers." The judge's expression was unreadable, but I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Mr. Fisher objected, but the judge allowed Mr. Green's testimony to remain in the record. Then came my friends, my army of strong women. Eleanor testified first, her voice filled with dignity. I have known Mrs. Miller for years as a neighbor, and I have never seen her as happy and clear-headed as she is now. Her decision to reclaim her life is not a sign of incompetence, but of immense courage. Cynthia, my hairstylist, spoke about how my appointments had changed from a rare luxury to a weekly ritual. Helen used to always talk about her son and daughter-in-law, and she always seemed tired and worried. Now, she talks about her paintings and her travels. She is a completely different woman, and in a very good way. Maria and Alfreda followed, each recounting stories of my emotional recovery and my ability to manage my life, my finances, and my new hobbies. The judge listened attentively, especially when Alfreda spoke. Your Honor, a child's love cannot be bought or sold. When a mother has to pay for her son's attention, it is not she who is incompetent, but he. The final witness was me. I walked to the stand and looked directly at Michael and Samantha. For the first time, I felt no sadness or resentment, just a cold clarity. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Weber began, your son claims that your decision to cut off his financial support is a sign of mental instability. Can you explain to the court the true reason for your decision? My decision to stop financing my son and daughter-in-law's lives was the most rational decision I have made in years. It was a choice born out of clarity, not confusion. After years of giving and giving, I was completely excluded from their lives, even from my son's wedding. They didn't even have the decency to tell me. I only learned about it from social media. I recounted all the money I had spent on them, the $3,400 that represented my retirement, my peace of mind, the legacy of my late husband. I'm not incompetent. I was simply naive. I believed that love could be bought with money. I was wrong. Michael tried to stand up, but his lawyer quickly pulled him back down. So, the decision to stop giving them money was a conscious decision on your part to protect yourself and your assets? Mr. Weber asked. Yes. It was an act of self-preservation. When I realized they saw me as an obstacle between them and their money, and not as a person, I decided to choose my own happiness. I saw the judge looking at the financial documents Mr. Weber had submitted. I had a feeling that the money spoke a much clearer language than the fabricated words of Michael and Samantha's witnesses. The hearing was adjourned for the day. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high, my friends surrounding me, forming a human shield. Michael and Samantha left in silence, their faces grim, defeated. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt I had a real chance of winning. The day after the hearing, I found a strange sense of peace. The courtroom was a battlefield, but I had a clear conscience. I spent the morning in my garden, a place that now felt like a sanctuary, a true testament to my freedom. Around noon, the mail arrived, and I found a letter from Mr. Weber. The return address was the courthouse. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened it. The words swam before my eyes, but one word stood out: dismissed. The judge had ruled in my favor. The incompetence lawsuit was dismissed. He had cited my mental health evaluation, the testimony of my friends, and my financial records as overwhelming evidence of my competence. The judge's statement was a final blow to Michael and Samantha's case. He had concluded that my actions were a rational response to an act of emotional and financial abuse. But there was more. The judge ordered Michael and Samantha to attend mandatory financial counseling and family therapy sessions, noting that their behavior was a form of elder abuse. He also issued a permanent restraining order, banning them from my property and from contacting me directly. I was finally, truly free. I called Eleanor, my voice thick with emotion. We won, Eleanor. We won everything. I then called Margaret, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't crying tears of sadness, but tears of pure, unadulterated triumph. Later that afternoon, I saw Michael and Samantha's cars parked down the street again. This time I felt no fear, no anger, just a calm curiosity. They were both sitting in the car looking defeated. Michael held an envelope in his hands. He saw me looking at them and got out of the car, his posture slumped. He walked towards me with the hesitant steps of a defeated soldier. I didn't run. I stood my ground, my arms crossed, a shield of strength. He didn't look me in the eye. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We got this." He handed me the envelope and I took it. It was an eviction notice. They had been kicked out of their apartment for not paying rent for 2 months. Samantha ran up to me, her face pale, her eyes filled with tears, not of frustration this time, but of genuine fear. "Helen, please. We have nowhere to go. We'll be homeless. We can change, we promise. We'll do whatever you want. We'll go to therapy. We'll apologize." For a moment, a wave of pity washed over me. This was my son, the boy I had raised with so much love. This was the woman I had tried to welcome into our family. But then I remembered the courtroom, the accusations, the lies, the humiliation, and the secret wedding. This was not a moment of crisis for them. It was a consequence of their own actions. "Michael," I said, my voice as calm as a summer lake, "I gave you everything I could. I gave you 30 years of my life and 3 years of my retirement savings. My job as your mother is over. Your responsibility now is to be an adult, to get a job, to be a man, to take care of your wife, and to be responsible for your own life." I handed him Mr. Weber's business card. "You need to work to solve your own problems, not expect me to solve them for you." Michael looked at the card and then at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "You're really going to let us be homeless?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "I am not letting you be homeless. You have done that to yourselves. Every action has a consequence, and this is the consequence of your greed." I turned my back on them and walked away. My heart was not heavy. For the first time, it felt light and free. I had not only won the lawsuit, I had won my life back. The battle was over, but the most important journey was just beginning. The final part of my story was about living my life to the fullest, a life that was now entirely my own. The days following the verdict were filled with a strange, quiet triumph. It was the calm after the storm, the peace that settles in your soul after a long battle. I took a trip I had postponed for years, a solo vacation to the coast. It was the first time I had ever traveled alone, and the experience was both terrifying and incredibly liberating. I walked on the beach, collected seashells and watched the waves, feeling each one wash away a little more of the old Helen, the woman who had put everyone else's needs before her own. I called Eleanor every night and we spoke for hours, laughing and planning all the things we would do when I returned. I visited my sister, Margaret, in Chicago. For the first time, our conversations weren't about what Michael was doing or what Samantha needed. They were about us, about our memories, our dreams, and our plans for the future. Margaret looked at me and said, "You have a light in your eyes that I haven't seen in over 30 years. It's the light of a woman who is truly living." When I returned home, I made 2 final decisions that would seal my new life. The first was to donate a significant amount of money to a local charity that helps elderly people who are victims of abuse. I didn't do it to prove a point to Michael and Samantha. I did it because I knew there were other people like me who needed help and a voice. It was a symbolic act, a final farewell to the old life of being a bank account for others. The money that had once been the source of so much pain and manipulation was now being used for a cause that was so deeply personal. The second decision was to focus all my energy on my own happiness. I went back to painting, and my art flourished with my newfound freedom. I painted landscapes from my travels and portraits of the friends who had become my new family. Eleanor and I started a book club and a walking group. We laughed more than I had in years. I had thought that true family was only about blood, but I was wrong. My new family was built on a foundation of respect, love, and loyalty, something that Michael and Samantha had never given me. Years later, I received a letter. It was from Michael. He had lost his job and his wife. He was living alone in a small apartment, and he was struggling. He said he was truly sorry and that he finally understood what I had tried to do. I didn't reply to the letter, not because I was still angry, but because I had moved on. My life was full now, filled with friends, adventures, and a peace that I had never known. I had learned the most important lesson of all. that your own self-worth is not measured by how much you give, but by how much you value yourself. I finally understood that I was not a resource to be used, but a person to be cherished. The final lesson from Helen's story is a simple one, but it is the truth that every one of us, especially as we get older, needs to hear. Your life is not an investment for your children's future. It is your own. Your value is not determined by your generosity, but by your dignity. Recognize the signs of emotional and financial abuse from those you love and have the courage to say, "No more." This story is proof that it is never too late to reclaim your life, to find your voice and to create a new, beautiful beginning. Don't let your story end with a question mark. Turn it into a statement of power. Just like Helen, you have the strength to reclaim your life and build a future on your own terms. For more stories of incredible resilience and real-life lessons, subscribe to our channel and join our community. Your journey to freedom and self-worth starts now.